Welcome back to Bobberbob, and today we're going to start doing some fabricating for the first time probably in a long time. So we're going to have to recommission some tools, and I'm going to tell you what we're going to make. So this video here, which has been upscaled because it's pretty old now, is a video of my 2004, I bought it new in 2006, it had sat a couple of years, my Softail Springer FXSTS, carbureted version, 130 rear tyre, real analog, great bike, absolutely loved it. Not really sure why I got rid of it, but I did. Anyway, I did a lot of work to this bike over the years that I owned it with different versions of it, with the taller bars and the single cable and the light relocation, just lots and lots of changes, made the seat. And this is a video I took calling myself Bobberbob, actually, 15 years ago, unbeknownst to me, but it's it's been around that long. I had this bike, and the thing that I really wanted to do to it was put the jockey shifter foot clutch on it. And I also had fitted, or I fitted it myself, but I also fitted the auto clutch, which from the time was from Revlock, which is no longer a company, but that's what got me to be able to come to a complete stop in gear and then move forward. So this little video will have this part explaining what we've got going on, and this is what I want to make a new version of for the Milwaukee 8 Heritage Softail. My clutch lever is missing because after just recently getting one of the most cool parts of my bike is you can't see it, unfortunately, but it lives in there. And big thanks to Alan in Denver from Revlock. The auto clutch is in there, which means you can come to a complete standstill in gear, and you don't need to use the clutch. The clutch relief pedal now just hosts a cable that comes from the other side underneath the bike with a bit of a mechanism to operate it with. And then I've got my jockey shifter, my hand shifter there, with the 8-ball on the top, which is pretty cool. So to fit this jockey shifter, I think there are 5 steps. The first step will be changing the clutch cable. Now this 19 Heritage, and I think from Milwaukee on, which was 17s and onwards for this model bike, is that they changed to a 2-piece clutch cable, which is really useful if you want to change your bars. This has had changed bars, and so from the junction point down at the front through to the bars, you can just buy the second half that suits your needs. The previous cable to this had a metal adjustment screw and then like a little rubber boot over it, but it goes all the way from the gearbox right round to the clutch lever right up to the bar. That's what we want because we can change that, and then of course I'll keep the original parts off the bike in a box so we don't have to change those. So that's the first thing, the clutch cable. So another thing we need to do when we're doing this jockey shift conversion is that we're going to change out the clutch lever and actually remove it from the handlebars, which actually may mean that we have to work out another way of mounting the mirror because it's mounted through a hole in the clutch lever. Although I'm trying to de-mirror the bike and just have one on the other side, so that might work well for us. So this particular clutch perch, it's called, has like a half circle bracket on the back and then the lever on the front. So we're going to get rid of the lever, and I'll just buy another half bracket and then put those two together, probably by tapping a couple of helicoiled threads into the other one, and then we can mount it and it'll look tidy in front of the switch gear here. Now, of course, one of the main features of having a jockey shift bike is a jockey lever, and the name jockey sounds a little bit like it's connected to being on a horse and you've got the little sort of whip behind you. The lever will come out here off the top of the shifter arm, which will go as well, and we'll also remove the rear gear changer pedal there, and so we'll make a bracket and we'll have the lever coming out here so that when you're on it just sits behind your leg. Now we're going to get closer to a bit of the action here. So this is going to be one of the more
challenging pieces of work to do. And that's because no one makes a foot clutch kit that I can find anywhere on the internet for such a modern Harley. You can get them for your Evos and your shovels and all of the things really pre-twin cam, but we're going to have to make something that works just to actuate the cable, the new cable from the other side as it comes around the front. I've got some brackets and we'll have a look on the bench in a moment at some parts. But what we're going to want to do is have, as the cable comes around, this cable will go, we're going to have a little actuator that operates off the same bracket with the same arm, or one like it, that pulls the cable. So that's going to be another change that we need to make, is a foot pedal clutch. So with the clutch cable, with the perch being remade to, I guess, cancel out the lever, and the jockey shift lever that we'll have to make, the gear changer, and also the cable actuator. That's the four main things that we can do, and actually then ride the bike. The last thing that I want to do a little bit down the track is fit a new clutch, and that's going to be a recluse clutch or something like it, where I'll be able to come to a complete stop with the bike in gear. And because it will be like a centrifugal mechanism inside of here, I'll just have to lift the revs and it will pick up again without having to have my foot on the clutch actuator. So that's going to be like the last thing that we'll do.
So on the bench here, I've got the original foot shifter that came with the bike. And in one of my other videos, you see that I swapped out for the double heel toe shifter, which means that this section was longer. But on my 2004 Springer Softail, I got another one of these shifter parts like this, just the same. There we are, sort of similar orientation. And obviously cut this one down and made a little pulley with the distance that matches the clutch lever setup, so it's got a similar amount of travel. So just to demonstrate on this one, that's quite a snug washer, how it will end up looking will be something like this. The eyelet, whether we keep that or make another one when the new cable comes. I did have a cable that I had changed and adapted and kept for years, but I can't find it. So we've ordered a new one, and that's fine. So it'll be something like this. It'll come into an eyelet that we'll have, and then the cable will come through the pedal bracket, and then the pedal will be here. So it'll sit that way. But essentially it's going to either pull down or maybe pull backwards, but probably pull down, then water and anything will just ever run off it if it's in the rain. I'll try and have it having a downward action to it. But that's the idea of it. And then we'll build in some stoppers so that, a bit like a clutch lever, it can hit a stopper. But had to make all of this, 15 years ago when I did it on my last bike. So we'll get there. But part of this being made already is really good because it's the same dimensions, apart from that looks a little bit longer now that I'm looking at it. But it will do the trick, because the shaft is the same in everything. So that'll be the actuator that goes on the back of the foot pedal. So being able to do some of this fabrication work, which I've done before, haven't done anything for a while, I'm going to have to recommission some of my tools, one of which is my welder. So let's turn around and have a little look at what we've got. So this is my MIG welder, and it's had a few iterations over the years, meaning it can run on gas and it can run on flux core. And currently it was set up to run on gas, and I've run out of gas, just CO2 was enough. And I can't get anything just readily in a disposable form in the last few days. And that means that I need to obviously remove this. This is the gassed wire, remove that, and take a note of my polarizing here because you have to swap them back over when you go to gasless wire, the polarity. And so we'll get that off, and we will put the new wire on the flux core because I don't have much to weld, and we'll make sure that it's all working on the bench. So I went out this morning and got a few new bits. I've never had a pair of welding pliers, so I've got a pair of those just to sort of cut the wire and clean out the nozzle and pull the wire if you need to. A little reel of the flux core wire for welding with. Some nozzle dip. Now, I've never had a tin of that, but that's really handy when you get your nozzle before you weld, and when it gets hot, you just sort of shove it in there and it stops it from sticking. Just some cut-off blades and a grinding disc. And also, if I need to heat something to bend it, I already had this, but I bought a new tank of the gas to do that with. Pull the trigger and watch the wheel. And it'll shoot out here in a few seconds. Oh, I can feel it coming up through the trigger. Oh, so it's bound a little bit. Could be just stuck at the tip here. So we'll just use the tool to crack open this. I can feel it's stuck somewhere, so I'll have a little look. Right, we'll give it a try. Bit of the dip gel, anti-spatter, all the stuff. I mean, it'll do the job. It looks a bit pooey, but it's my first go, so we'll have another try. Well, I think the welder is back in working order, which is great. Enough for what I need. So now we're going to get to the first bit of making for this jockey shifter, which is going to be the lever and the bracket that goes onto the gear selector arm that comes out of the gearbox, sort of deep in behind the clutch basket there. So let's rummage around for a piece of steel. Let's do some CAD cardboard aided design work to make our first bracket, and maybe even a lever bar, which I've got from an old wheel brace, which we'll cut up and use. And that can be our first piece of the jockey shift job done. I have a feeling that this will actually come off the spline. If you remember my iceberg video, which was about the Ultra, one of the things was in fixing the output seal was that there wasn't enough clearance, and there looks like there is plenty of clearance between the edge of that arm and the inside of this housing. So I'm going to try and undo this hex head bolt and just slip it off the spline, but I'll just mark up where it goes first. So as you can see, there's a decent gap between here and there now. So I think if I was to undo that, it should come off. So I've preloaded my pen, hopefully to put like a dot there and a dot on the arm to help me with realignment, but that should be okay. There's the bolt. Now we've got to see if this just slides nicely off the spline. Oh, it is coming off the spline. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful improvement, Harley-Davidson, on being able to get that off without having to take that off. Well done. That's the way it goes. We are wanting to have something that reaches to that hole and reaches to that hole. If we just make a cut up here, make like a foot that way, so that it will go around the back of the, doesn't have to be exact it'll go around there, because that bit can come off, and then we'll have it folding in. Although now that I think about it, we need to get the tool down over the top. So we may have to come around the back. This is all part of the learning. Well, let's just fold it the other way. We'll come down that way, and we'll make the foot go that way. Yep, and I'll also just cut a bit this way, because we don't need all of that. So something like this, where the bracket could obviously go around there. You should just trace around that. Something like this. Copy around it and then bend that bit in later. Always accumulate lots of things when you're making stuff, I find. Here's one I made earlier. So anyway, that's what happens. So we've got this now, this piece. It's looking quite nice and finished. And it goes on the arm behind the back and then like this. So here's the fasteners for it. Obviously this one goes through the linkage, which it doesn't need to do now, it just goes straight through like this. And then this one goes around the back with the slightly bigger head size. I think that should do. And I think once that gets sort of wound in pretty strongly like that, it'll do the trick. Right, there we are. So that's where we've got to. So this little piece here gives you the stability, and you've got 2 anchor points, which is good. That goes on the shaft, and now we've got a place to mount our jockey rod off, which will be the next part. So let's go rummaging for some steel to make the shifter rod, which will come off there, and then we'll weld this onto there, and that'll come off out to the side. Okay, here we go. Fitted now back onto the shaft. Try not to get the shadows in the way, but there it is now. So we've got a nice, sorry about the noise, got a nice surface down here to run the shaft. It's fairly snug. Just trying to think of how big that would be. What do we got? So we've only got this gap here, from here to here. It's probably a good 20 millimeters. But if we're going to run some kind of a shaft, and I'll just use the socket as an example of how wide, that's going to have to, see, that's probably too fat, so it's going to have to, I was hoping to run it down there, but what I could do is I can always grind that type of a size piece of metal right down to halfway, and then that sort of travels down the arm a little bit just to sort of give it some carry top to bottom. So we just need to get a piece of metal now to measure up some lengths and see what we've got. I was thinking this, it's an old wheel brace, which has got the length, but this is going to interrupt the sort of smoothness of the round, because it's sort of one of them eats into the other one a little bit with its weld. I do have this, a bit of a drift bar, which is quite a good size, nice and fat, solid, good length. It's going to do the trick, but I sort of like it as a drift bar. But I might sacrifice it and just, you know, find something else to drift with, maybe even cut that down as a drift bar. But I think this might do the job. It's another day, had a haircut, so you might notice that. It's terrible outside. It's not supposed to be very good for the weekend, so it's a great opportunity to continue with the project. I've got more parts that have come in. We'll look at those on the bench, and then we're going to trim the welding nozzle. That's going to make that part of the job done, and then we will proceed
on with the Jockey Lever. I've got the 8-ball. I'm going to maybe switch it up and actually use that wheel brace instead, because I think the length will be okay for what I now want to do. So let's press on and keep going on this project. Right, so it's a bit of a mid part 1 break because parts have come in. So as mentioned before, the clutch cable now has arrived with that older style adjustment point. This is a new unused old stock cable and it looks like a really good length, so hopefully I'm not going to need to trim it, which would be great. That came in. The clutch perch came in, so where the handle gets removed, I've got an option of doing a couple of things. Now that I have this, I'm just thinking about which way to go. I can take this side off and tap it to mate up with the other one, or I could, because this is one solid piece, I could cut this one off, this part, and just sort of maybe smooth it off, because it's already got the threads molded into it. So I'll think about that. And for the lever, which I think will be quite cool, is the 8-ball shifter. And it comes with a selection of 3 different inserts. That's really cool. It seems quite large, but maybe that's the size of an 8-ball shifter. It's got an insert already in there, or you can sort of narrow it down, collar it down with 3 different options of rod size. So I'll probably go with this biggest one, because that will be I can just sort of tap the diameter of that when I cut this one down, once I've just checked the length. But that's some of the parts that have come in. That's all the parts that I need to have come in to be able to ride the bike. I'm just thinking about and working out on getting the clutch unit in from Recluse. I have to do it via a company in Australia, so that's how close the dealer is, so I'm going to have to work on that. That looks like it might be a couple of grand, so that's pretty expensive. But I can at least get mobile with these parts fitted to the bike. So let's trim this nozzle down. Then we've got the welder a bit more suited to gasless wire. And then we will work on the length of the shaft that we want to go from the bracket up to the end. We'll tap the end, weld it on, bend it, then that will be the lever done. So that's good. We have got this far. So, mount, 8-ball, welded and sort of shined up and finished, and I'll probably finish it in a black satin or gloss just to sort of match the bike. Mounting points, that's the back. And I will just extend this with a bit of thread, chop it off, and that's what will go into the ball. So the ball will end up sitting about flush with the top. So that's the next bit of the job to do.
This is where we're up to. I think that's come out okay. Bracket, shaft, and then the tip that I've blended in. Taken quite a bit of time to try and make that look nice. Blend it from slightly one size to another, but I'm going to try the ball, and I haven't tried this yet, so here we go. And then I'll Loctite that on later. So there we go. The ball's a bit fat, but I think it'll be all right. We'll offer that up to the bike, see how that looks, then I'll give it a paint. And that will be the end of this section of the build, which is the jockey shift lever. So we've got to this stage. I should have thought about the orientation of the 8. It really needs to go around like another half turn. I've still got a couple of threads there, and I could take a little bit off the top, and then I get to orient the 8 how I would like it to be. So I might mark it up and do that. But at this stage, it'll be important to see how it sits on the leg, as it were. So if I'm riding, that's going to be just schmicko, perfect right there. And even with somebody's foot there, I think we should be okay. And then coming to a stop, which would be represented by the red trolley, both feet down. I've still got room under here without it feeling like it's touching my leg. So that little kinked end, I think, was a really good bit to do. So up there, brilliant, not reaching right down, it's just sort of right there. Good clearance here, on the ground, good. Job done. Give it a paint, reorient the 8, and then that will be this part finished. Time to do some baking. And I'll put those things back later. So that's the 8-ball shifter part of this jockey shifter project completed. Stick around, stay tuned for the next episode to see what we make next. This is Bobberbob. See you later.